Hey guys, Psychotic here, and in these times we might as well stay home and learn new stuff. And today I'm gonna try my best to learn you guys how to make stinger transitions. So let's go. So when we want to make a stinger transition with this method, we basically need three programs. Something that I'm not gonna cover in this particular video is that you also need to have your logo on hand. You could probably make one out of basic shapes and some text in PIXLR. So if you guys want a video on how to make your own logo in the future, let me know in the description. For this video I am using my own logo, and with own logo I mean that it was something that was generated through a site called Render Forest, and I will put a link to their website in the description. So the most important thing about your logo is that it needs to have an alpha channel, basically a PNG file, not JPEG. What that means is that it's gonna have a transparent background and not just a plain white background, for instance. If your logo doesn't have a transparent background, it's not gonna work. So for this tutorial we need three programs, as I mentioned. We need OBS, any instance of OBS like OBS Live or Streamlabs OBS. To make the stinger in itself, we do need something to edit in, and in this particular video I'm using PIXLR. PIXLR is not a software that you need to download specifically. You're basically just editing in your browser. Last but not least, we need an animation program, and for this I've been using DaVinci Resolve 16. I will put a link in the description for all the program install files. So what we want to achieve in PIXLR is basically make the parallelograms that are basically moving and filling the entire screen at one point for our logo then to appear and then disappear again. What we need to do is set up some parameters first. So what you can begin with is by setting the resolution to 1920 x 1080p, because that's gonna be adequate for most people. You also want to make sure that the background is not selected, because that's gonna make a solid background instead of the transparent background. And then when you then export the file or save the file to an image, you just have to make sure that you save it as a PNG file and not a JPEG file, basically. So when you have named your file and set up all the parameters, you're gonna get introduced to the editor itself. What you need to do is start by going down to kind of like the tilted painted bucket logo, and which is called fill, and it's basically gonna fill out like the entire canvas with the color that you've chosen. I've basically chosen three colors that complement my logo's like main colors, so a bit of orangey, and then we need a black layer as well. The black layer is probably the most important one and has to be in the foreground, so that has to be like the top layer. So when your first layer is done and filled with solid black, you can then go ahead and make two new layers and basically do the same thing, but with two other colors that you have chosen for your stinger transition. You can just go ahead and follow what I've done on screen as well, if that's easier. What you want to do now is go up, click edit on the top tab, which is beside files, then click 3D distort, and then you just basically follow what I'm doing here and making these kind of parallelograms. And I'll speed up the process because you need to do this for all the layers. So now we are finished with making the basic shapes and all the parallelograms, but it's not looking that nice. It's very blocky at the moment. So what we can do, and this is gonna be a bit different on the new editor than what is being shown on screen here, but I'll try to go through it as best as I can. So you can't really go into layer styles anymore by right click. So what you need to do is to go up where it says filter on the top, right beside the adjustment and view, and here you can find the outer glow option. What you need to make sure of is that you have chosen the correct layer at the right side. And I also recommend that you do the outer glow layer style for, well, basically for each parallelogram that you've just made. So you can adjust the size of the glow, the feathering, like how transparent the edges of the glow is gonna be, and then the overall opacity. And then you can adjust it until you're satisfied. That's basically the most important thing, that you are satisfied with what you've just made. So all you need to do now is to save the image, and just remember the most important thing is to basically save it as a .png file. Otherwise, again, you won't get that alpha channel, so the background won't be transparent, which is paramount to making a stinger transition this way. So next up we're gonna use DaVinci Resolve to actually animate what we've just made along with our logo. So what we need to do is basically bring everything over from our folder and then into DaVinci Resolve, but I'll show you how to do this. Okay, so the first thing you do when DaVinci Resolve has opened is, of course, make a new project and name it whatever you want. I believe we named this one Stinger Tutorial. So next thing we have to do is basically import all of the PNG files, like your logo and your Stinger transition that we just made in PIXLR over to DaVinci Resolve. So there are several ways you can transfer your files from your hard disk into DaVinci Resolve, but the way I did it was basically just by drag and dropping it from the folder where my files were located, and then just alt-tabbing over to DaVinci Resolve and dropping it into the media pool. Just bear in mind that for everything in DaVinci Resolve, if you ever move any files, you need to manually relocate them within DaVinci Resolve. Otherwise, you'll just get kind of these offline images for videos, for instance, or sound is not gonna be played, etc. It's basically because DaVinci Resolve doesn't know where to locate the files any longer, because you moved them somewhere else. It's not gonna be a problem as long as you don't move any files from the folders after you have imported them into the media pool within DaVinci Resolve. I also imported a sound file. This is optional, but it just gives that extra effect for when the transition comes in, that it gives like a swooshing sound. Okay, time for the fun part where you'll actually get to see the fruition of your hard work. Okay, so for us to be able to animate the still images, we basically need to make a new fusion composition, as it's called, and it's located under the effects tab, which you can then expand, as you can see I'm doing right here, and then drag and drop the fusion composition over to the timeline at the bottom right. Okay, so as you can see right here, one of the first things we want to do is basically zoom in on the timeline, which makes it a lot easier for us to make a composition that's gonna be around 3 seconds long. You can actually see the timestamps as I'm demonstrating here. and you can see where it says 1 point something something, and then 2, and then 1 point something something 4, and you just have to locate like 3, which is gonna be in the middle of those 2 numbers or locations. And when you are finished with doing that, you just click on the Fusion tab at the bottom, as you can see here. Now this is where all the magic is gonna happen. Okay, so as you can see, there's already a little kind of tab on the Fusion screen, which says Media Out. And this is basically how all of our files, our pictures, are gonna be sent out and be shown in the final product. But what we need to do first is basically go into the media pool, as you can see here, and then need to transfer all of our medias onto the timeline of the Fusion composition. Without doing this, no files would ever be shown, so it's pretty important that we do this. As you can see, when we drag and drop the 2 PNG files or images, they're actually changing names to Media in 1 and Media in 2. What we then need is 2 transform tabs, and drag them onto the Fusion composition timeline. And we also need a merge, so everything is basically collected at this one single point for them to be going out to the media out and then shown to the viewer. Okay, so the next part might seem a bit complicated, but it's really not. Like, you can see me connecting these lines, and it's very important that one media in goes to only one transform, because again, this is how you edit, and this is how we are gonna like make that animation and transform the size, etc. of the individual pictures. What's most important though is that we want our logo to be in the foreground, and the image that we made in PIXLR to be in the background. The way we do this, I believe, is to first connect the background image and then connect the logo to the merge in that order. Otherwise it might mess it up. You might have to fiddle around a bit with it at first, but it should work in the end. So what we want to do first is to enlarge the background or the PNG image we made in PIXLR, so it only shows the black, so only the black part is visible to begin with. We do this by clicking on the transform node that is connected directly to our media in node, which represents our background picture. Then we navigate over to the right side where it says size, and then just enlarge it as much so it's only the black part of the image that is visible. Okay, so what we want to do now is basically take our stinger background and transform it so it moves from the left towards the center, and then from the center to the right. So we don't want this also happening in one single motion, because otherwise our stinger background is basically gonna pass by quicker than our logo is able to pop up and then disappear again. So what we need to do is for the stinger background to basically pause at the center for a short amount of time, and then just disappear as well with the logo. This is where keyframes are gonna be very important. Okay, so as shown on the screen, what you need to do is go here and then basically drag your image all the way to the left at the 0 position on the timeline, and then you have to click on the little diamond shape to the side, as you can see here, because that's gonna set your keyframe at this position. Okay, so what you want to do now is to basically center the image, as you can see here, and then so the picture is gonna be at the center of the screen on the 18 marker, as you can see here. You basically just click on the timeline so it shows 18 at the bottom right corner. And then you will make another keyframe at 53 with the same position. So what it's gonna do is that from the interval between 18 position and 53 position, it's gonna stay in the middle, so it's not gonna pass by before we tell it to. And then you go all the way to the right on the timeline at 70, and you basically drag the image all the way to the right. Remember to again click on the little diamond shape when you've dragged the image all the way to the right, otherwise it won't make a keyframe. Okay, so we are pretty close to finishing the stinger transition animation now. What we want to do is to resize our logo so we can't see it to begin with. So what we do is on the timeline at the 0 position, we are gonna make the size of the image to 0. Then at the 10 position and at the 18 position, it's gonna stay at its like regular size. That's when it's gonna start to grow into its regular size. So it's not gonna be visible until the 10 marker on the timeline, and then grow to normal size until it hits the 18 marker. Then it's gonna stay like this as far as the 53 marker, and then we want it to go back down and disappear from around 53 to 63 on the timeline. And you can follow along as I'm doing it here on the screen. We are more or less doing the same as we did in the beginning of the animation, but in reverse basically. So it starts to grow in the beginning of the transition, and then it goes back down. The last thing in the fusion composition that we want to do is make the animation a little bit smoother, because it's a very like stiff transition as it is right now. It might not be too visible, and you don't even have to do this, but it just looks a bit nicer, a little bit cleaner. So what we are gonna do is go to the spline menu, as you can see here on the top right, and then you're gonna select everything, check everything, so it's the effect is gonna be applied to our entire animation and all our media. And then you're basically gonna like right click and then choose flat. And as you can see, the curves instead of being like very like stiff, the curves have become more like transitional, like smoother transitions. They've been like smoother and not as like stiff or steep transitions. So it's more like a soft curve now. Okay, so it might not translate as well on a YouTube video, but it's actually doing like that small change, which makes the animation look a bit smoother. Okay, so as I said, importing a sound file or connecting a sound file to the animation is not that important. It's optional, but I'm showing here how you do it. You basically go back to the edit tab at the bottom, and then you drag and drop from the media pool like your audio file, and then you just line it up with where you want it to make the audio file. And I'm basically doing it once for when it like transitions in, and then one for when it transitions out again, and it just gives that much nicer effect to it, and a bit more punch. Okay, so believe it or not, we're actually done with the animations themselves, but what we need to do now is make them into a viable file so we can use it in OBS. So what we need to do now is, and it's very important that all the settings are done the right way, otherwise we are not going to get our alpha channel, and we are not going to get that transparency on, or that transparent background that we need to have for it to work. So what you do is that you go into the render settings, and we need the H264 quicktime.mov file, and you choose GoPro Cineform with RGB 16, and then very important to click on the export alpha. And the export alpha setting is the most important thing of all this, because that's what it's gonna give us that transparent background. You need to make your finished rendered file from DaVinci Resolve into a WEBM file, otherwise you cannot import it into OBS. And I'll post a link to the converter that I've been using to do this, and everything that I've used today is basically free, except the logo, that if you want a higher quality PNG file, you do need to pay some cash, but it does result in a very, very high quality picture. But you can probably find other ways to make a logo that is also free. But if you want a video on that topic as well, you can write in the comments. So in this tutorial, again, like all of the setup and installing of the programs, etc., is not the focus point. So I'll just assume that you already set up any form of like OBS, whether it be Streamlabs OBS or OBS Live from Stream Elements, or just the classic OBS. So what you need to do is go to Scene Transitions, and then you click on the Make New Transition with the plus sign here, and then you choose Stinger Transition, and then you set the transition time to around 1500 milliseconds. If you don't do this, the scene behind the transition, the Stinger transition, basically the switching from one scene to another is gonna be way too quick. So the scene is already gonna be shown up before the transition is even done. So it's very important that you give it this kind of transition time to around the 1500 ms. Okay guys, so that's how you make a Stinger transition, and it's really not that difficult to make. And I hope that with everything that I've been explaining, that you would also be able to kind of transfer that knowledge into making your own Stinger transitions as well. There's a lot of customizability and places where you can tweak it into your own unique like Stinger transition. So far I've only done like that one type of Stinger transitions, but maybe in the future I'd like to try to do something else. Either way, like if you like the video, please give a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to, and if you have suggestions for topics that you want covered in the future, let me know, because then I'll try and see what I can do for you guys as well. We might as well just learn together, and especially in these times where a lot of you guys have to stay at home. Fortunately, like my workplaces haven't been affected because I'm privately like employed, so. But that doesn't mean that we can't learn new stuff, and this is one of the things that I definitely learned. So yeah, until next time, stay safe and have a good one. Bye.